412 days.
The rules said, don't look at his face.
But then,
I found the box.
I didn't have a voice left, so I hummed.
And someone hummed back.
I hear you. Don't let go.
The door was open.
He was right behind me.
Until the world turned blue and red.
My fingernail broke off. It snapped right down to the pink part, and a tiny drop of blood came out. It stings, but I had to finish the line. The wall is soft here. If I push hard enough, the white paint flakes off and makes a little pile of dust on the floor. I blew the dust away. It looked like snow falling. I counted the lines again. I used my finger to touch each one so I wouldn't mess up. 412. That is a huge number. It is bigger than the number of kids in my whole grade. It is bigger than the number of toys I have at home. 412 times I have gone to sleep and woken up in this box. The room is very small. If I lie down flat, my head touches the back wall and my toes almost touch the door. It makes me feel like I am in a shoebox. The air smells bad. It smells like the basement when the pipes leaked. It smells like wet cardboard and old water. I try to take tiny breaths so I don't taste the air. I crawled back to the mattress. There are no sheets or blankets. It is just a scratchy pad with blue stripes. There is a stain in the middle. Yesterday, it looked like a monster with a big mouth. Today, it looks like a cloud. I traced the edge of the cloud with my finger. The mattress felt damp and cold. Everything here is cold. My t-shirt is too thin and my arms have bumps on them. I hugged my knees to my chest to keep the warm inside my stomach. Then the floor shook. I felt it before I heard it. The vibration traveled through the wood and into my legs. The shaking means he is coming. My stomach twisted into a hard knot. It felt like I swallowed a heavy stone. I pushed my back hard against the corner. I wanted to push right through the wall and fall outside. I tried to make myself tiny. I wanted to be smaller than a mouse. I wanted to be invisible. The footsteps were heavy. They sounded like hammers hitting the ground. Thump, thump, thump. They got louder and louder until they stopped right outside the wood. I held my breath. My heart was beating so fast it hurt my ribs. I was scared he could hear it beating through the door. Then the lock started. The first lock slid back with a sharp metal noise. It echoed in the small room. Then the second one. It sounded rusty and slow. Then the third one. That one is the loudest. It sounded like a bone snapping. The doorknob turned slowly. The door opened and the light went away. The tall man stood there. He is too big for the doorway. His shoulders touched the sides of the frame. He blocked the light bulb that hangs in the hallway, so he looked like a giant black shadow. He is so tall that his head almost touches the ceiling. I did not look up. I stared at the floor. That is the most important rule. The rules say I can't look at his face. If I look at his face, the bad things happen. I stared at his boots. They are black and huge. One of his boots is as big as my whole chest. There was dried mud on the toe of the left one. He took a step inside. The room felt even smaller now. The air felt heavy, like it was hard to breathe. I could smell him. He smelled like dirt and something sharp, like the stuff Dad uses to clean the garage. He bent down. It took him a long time because he is so tall. A big hand came down into my view. The fingers were thick and hairy. He put a plastic bowl on the floor. It slid a little bit on the wood. It is oatmeal again. It is gray and lumpy. There is no steam coming off it. It looks like glue. He stood back up. The shadow moved over me again. I squeezed my eyes shut. I trembled. I waited for the door to close. I am just a speck of dust. Please don't see me. Please don't speak. I am very small. I am nothing. The door closed with a soft click. It wasn't loud, but it felt like the end of the world. Then came the locks. The first one slid into place, then the rusty one, then the one that snaps. With every click, the air in the room felt a little bit lighter, like a heavy blanket was being pulled off my head. The shadow was gone. I didn't move yet. I stayed curled up in the corner. I had to be sure. I listened to his boots. They didn't go away fast. They moved slow and heavy. I could hear them on the wooden steps that go up to the rest of the house. The wood creaked above my head. It sounded like the house was groaning because he is so heavy. The steps got quieter and quieter, but I could still feel them in my teeth. When he walks, the whole world shakes a tiny bit. Finally, the shaking stopped. A door upstairs closed. Now it was just me and the quiet. The quiet is loud here. It rings in my ears. I looked at the plastic bowl. It was sitting in the middle of the floor where his big hand put it. I crawled over to it on my hands and knees. The floor splinters sometimes, so I have to be careful. My stomach made a growling noise. It hurt. It felt empty and hollow, like a balloon with no air. There was no spoon. He never gives me a spoon anymore. I think he thinks I might use it to dig at the wall. I used my fingers. The oatmeal was cold. It felt slimy, like the mud in the backyard after it rains. It didn't taste like anything. It just tasted like wet paste. I ate it fast. I shuffled it into my mouth with 3 fingers. If I eat it slow, my brain starts to think about what it is, and then my throat closes up. If I eat it fast, I can pretend it is warm soup. I licked the bowl clean. I didn't leave a single spot.
I can't be hungry later. Later is a long time away. I sat back on my heels and wiped my mouth with my shoulder. My shirt is dirty. It smells like the mattress. That was when I heard the new noise. Usually I hear the TV upstairs. I hear people laughing or shouting on the screen. But this was different. It wasn't a voice. It was a buzzing sound. It was low and angry. It sounded like a giant fly was stuck inside the ceiling. Or maybe a machine.
If I make noise, the boots might come back. The buzzing stopped for a second, then started again. It was closer this time. I pulled my head back from the door. I scrambled backward on my hands and feet until my back hit the mattress. I pulled my knees up to my chin. The room felt too small again. The walls felt like they were leaning in to touch me. I stared at the door handle, waiting for it to turn. The buzzing sound drilled into my ears. It was a bad sound. It was the sound of something changing, and change is always scary. The next time the boots came, they were fast. Usually the tall man walks slow and heavy, like he is trying to squash bugs on the floor. But today his feet sounded angry. He was stomping. The door flew open, but he didn't look at me. He didn't look at the bucket or the corner where I sleep. He was holding his phone tight against his ear. His knuckles were white. He was yelling into the phone. His voice wasn't like a person's voice. It was sharp and loud, like a big dog barking at a stranger. I covered my ears, but the sound still got in. He threw a bag on the floor. It slid across the wood and hit my foot. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I made myself as small as a pebble. He stepped back out. The door slammed shut. It shook the walls. I held my breath and listened for the locks. This is the most important part.
I have to count them every time. The first lock slid over. That was the top one. The second lock clicked. That was the rusty one. I waited for the third one. The third one is the one that snaps. It is the loudest one. It means I am trapped for good. I waited. I heard his boots stomping away. They went up the wooden stairs. They went fast. Then a door upstairs slammed, and the house was quiet. There was no third click. I stared at the white door. My heart started to beat very fast.
It felt like a bird was trapped inside my ribs, trying to fly out. My hands started to shake. I tucked them under my legs to make them stop, but my whole body was shivering. It had to be a trick. The tall man doesn't make mistakes. He is too big to make mistakes. He left the lock open on purpose. He is standing right on the other side, waiting for me to touch the handle. If I touch it, he will burst back in. He will be so mad. When he is mad, the room gets smaller and the air gets hot. I decided to wait. I had to be sure. I started to count. I counted to 10. Then I counted to 100. I counted all the way to 1,000. It took a long time. My throat felt dry. The silence in the basement was heavy.
It pressed against my ears. Every time the house creaked, I jumped, but the boots didn't come back. I stood up. My legs felt wobbly, like they were made of jelly. I walked to the door. I walked on my tiptoes so the floorboards wouldn't squeak. The gold handle was right in front of my face. It looked the same as always, but it felt dangerous now. It looked like the eye of a monster. I reached out. My hand was sweaty. I wiped it on my shirt. I reached out again. I grabbed the cold metal. I squeezed my eyes shut. I expected the door to be locked. I expected it to stay stuck. I turned my wrist. The handle turned. It turned all the way. There was a tiny sound, like a piece of metal sliding out of a hole. The door wasn't stuck. The door was free. I pulled it toward me just a tiny bit, just an inch. The air that came through the crack was different. It didn't smell like the basement damp. It smelled like old carpet and dust. It smelled like a house. I opened my eyes and looked through the crack. The hallway was dark. It was very long. It stretched out like a deep black tunnel. There were no windows. The floor had a rug with swirls on it that looked like snakes. It was quiet out there. Too quiet. It felt bigger than the whole world. I stood there with my hand on the handle, and for the first time, I was more scared of the open door than the closed one. I put one foot on the bottom step. The carpet on the stairs was gray and scratchy. It felt like steel wool against my bare toes. I waited. The house didn't make a sound. I took another step, then another. The stairs went up into the dark like a giant mouth. I was climbing right into the throat of the house. I moved slow. I moved slower than a snail. I kept my hand on the wall to balance, but I didn't touch the railing. The railing might rattle. The wall was covered in wallpaper that felt fuzzy, like the skin of a peach. I didn't like it. On the fourth step, the wood under the carpet groaned. It wasn't a loud noise, but in the quiet house, it sounded like a scream. I stopped breathing. My muscles turned into heavy stones. I squeezed my eyes shut and waited for the heavy boots. I waited for the yelling to start. I waited for the tall man to run down and grab me, but nothing happened. The silence came back, but now it felt heavier. I bit my lip hard. I tasted a little bit of blood, like a penny. It hurt, but the pain helped me stay quiet. I didn't cry. I am not allowed to cry. I crawled the rest of the way. Being low felt safer. If I was low, maybe the shadows would hide me. I reached the top floor. There was a doorway with no door. I peeked around the wooden edge. This was the big room. It was bigger than my whole basement. The ceiling was so high up, it was lost in the gray shadows. There was a window on the far wall, but it didn't show the outside world. Someone had taped thick black paper all over the glass. It looked like a big bruise on the wall. No sunlight could get in. It felt like nighttime in here, even though I knew it was day. The air up here was different too. It was stale and hot. It tasted like old electricity and dust. There was a sound in the room. It was a low hum. It sounded like a million angry bees trapped in a jar. It made my teeth hurt. I followed the sound. It was coming from a long metal table in the middle of the brown rug. The table was messy. There were wires everywhere. They were red and blue and black, tangled up like spaghetti. Right in the middle of the wire spaghetti sat a box. It was black and made of metal. It was ugly.
The humming came from inside it. The box had round dials on the front with numbers I didn't understand. But the scariest part was the light. There was a tiny glass circle on the front. It was glowing bright red. It didn't blink. It just stared at me. It looked like an angry red eye. It looked like the tall man's eyes when he yells.
I wanted the bees to stop buzzing. The noise was scratching the inside of my brain. I walked to the table. I was tall enough to see over the edge if I stood on my tiptoes. I reached out my hand. My fingers were shaking. I didn't want to touch it, but my hand moved anyway. I touched the side of the black box. It was freezing cold. It felt colder than the basement floor. The humming vibrated through my fingertips and went all the way up my arm to my shoulder. It felt like the box was alive, and it was angry that I touched it. My fingers felt slippery on the black knob. It was huge, almost as big as the lid on a jar of peanut jelly. It had little ridges all around the edge that dug into my skin. I took a deep breath. The air in the big room still tasted like dust and old pennies. I twisted my hand. The knob was stiff. It didn't want to turn. It felt like it was stuck in glue. I had to use both hands. I bit my tongue and pushed hard. The knob gave up. It turned just a little bit. The sound of the angry bees went away. A new sound came out of the box. It was loud and scratchy. It sounded like rain hitting a tin roof, or like when the TV goes gray and fuzzy in the middle of the night. It was a messy, sharp noise. I looked at the door. My heart started beating against my ribs like a trapped bird. I was sure the tall man could hear it.
I was sure his heavy boots would start stomping up the stairs any second. I wanted to turn it off. I reached out to make it stop. Then the voice came. It cut right through the scratchy rain sound. It was a man's voice, but it wasn't him. It wasn't the voice that yelled at me to eat my soup. It wasn't the voice that told me I was bad. This voice sounded clear. It sounded calm. It sounded like the voice of a teacher reading a book to the class. 7, the voice said. 4, 0. I froze. I stood on my tiptoes, staring at the angry red eye on the box. Where was the man? Was he tiny? Was he trapped inside the metal box like me? Correction, the voice said. 7, 4, 1. The static got louder for a second, then quieter. It sounded like wind blowing through trees. The man asked, "This is a priority channel." My stomach dropped. It felt like I was falling out of a swing. He was asking for me. He was asking if I was real. I opened my mouth. I wanted to yell. I wanted to scream, "I am here. Please come get me." But no sound came out. My throat felt like it was full of cotton balls. My jaw was locked tight. I was so used to being quiet that I forgot how to be loud. The fear was a heavy blanket wrapped around my face. Repeating coordinates, the man said. He sounded sad now. He sounded like he was gonna leave. I couldn't let him leave. There was a black thing hanging off the side of the box. It looked like a telephone, but without the part you put to your ear. It was just a handle with a mesh circle at the top. It was attached to the box by a curly black wire that looked like a pig's tail. I grabbed the handle. It was heavy and rough like a brick. The plastic smelled like burnt rubber. My hands were shaking so bad the curly wire bounced up and down. I pulled it close to my face. The mesh circle scraped my cheek. There was a small gray button on the side of the handle. My thumb found it. The button was cold. I knew I had to push it. If I pushed it, maybe the magic box would let the man hear me. But if I pushed it, the tall man might hear me too. I squeezed my eyes shut. I thought about the basement. I thought about the cold floor. I pushed the button as hard as I could. My thumb dug into the gray button. It hurt, but I didn't stop pushing. The plastic handle was slippery because my hands were sweating so much. I held it right in front of my mouth. I could smell the old, sour smell of the black mesh. It smelled like the inside of a shoe, but my tongue was stuck to the roof of my mouth. It felt like dry sandpaper. The silence in the room was huge. It was heavy. I was scared that if I didn't make a sound right now, the man in the box would go away forever. He would think I was just the wind. I closed my eyes. I pictured Mommy. I pictured her sitting on the edge of my bed when the thunder made the windows rattle. She would rub my back in circles. She would make a low sound, a tune that didn't need any words. So I did that.
I hummed. I didn't open my lips. I just let the noise buzz in my throat. It was the song about the boat, the one that goes gently down the stream. I hummed it shaky and quiet. My chest vibrated against my shirt. I hummed because it was the only thing I knew that wasn't screaming. It was a small sound, like a bee trapped in a jar. The box made a noise like a duck getting stepped on. It was a sharp, angry squawk that made me jump. Then the static stopped. The man came back. "Hold on," the man said. His voice was different now. He didn't sound like a sleepy teacher reading a book. He sounded fast. He sounded like I do when I find a lost toy under the couch. "I hear you. I hear a melody. Who is this? Talk to me." He heard me. He knew I was real. A tiny bubble of hope started to grow in my tummy. It felt warm. I took a big breath to try and use real words this time. Then the world broke. A sound came from outside. It came from the driveway. It was the sound of tires rolling over rocks. Crunch, pop. I stopped breathing. The bubble in my tummy popped. The sound got closer. It was the big truck, the one that smells like gasoline and dirt. He wasn't supposed to be back. The sun was still high in the sky. He was supposed to be gone for a long time. The engine noise stopped. The silence that came after was worse than the noise. Then a heavy door slammed shut. The sound was flat and hard. It shook the floorboards under my sneakers. He was here. The tall man was home. I looked at the black handle in my hand. It felt like a hot potato. I couldn't hold it anymore. My fingers opened up all by themselves. The handle fell. It hit the side of the metal box with a loud clack. It swung back and forth on its curly wire, bumping against the table. The man in the box shouted, "Kid?" I couldn't answer. I couldn't stay. I spun around. My legs felt weird. They felt like they were made of wobbly jelly. I couldn't feel my feet touching the rug. I stumbled toward the door. The hallway was dark and long. It looked like a tunnel. I had to get to the stairs. I had to get down before the front door opened. I ran, but in my head I was moving in slow motion. The air felt thick like syrup. I reached for the door frame, my fingernails scratching against the wood. I had to disappear.
I had to be nothing again. The stairs were too far away. They looked like they were 1,000,000 miles down the hall. I was only halfway across the rug when the silver lock on the front door made a sharp clicking sound. It sounded like a bone snapping. I couldn't run. If I ran, he would see me. If I moved, he would hear my sneakers squeak. The big wooden door started to open. It moved slowly, like a lazy eye waking up. The light from outside poured in. It was white and blinding. It punched into the dark hallway and hurt my eyes. I felt like a bug when someone lifts up a rock. I was exposed. I didn't think. My brain turned off and my legs just did what they wanted. I threw myself to the left. There was a small white door there. It was the place where the Coates lived. I pulled the handle and squeezed inside. I pulled the door shut just as the heavy boots stepped onto the wood floor of the entryway. The click of the closet door latch was tiny, softer than a whisper. I hoped the sound of the wind outside hid it. It was dark in there. It was darker than under my bed. It felt like being swallowed by a giant monster. The air was hot and still. It didn't move. It smelled terrible. It smelled like those little white balls Grandma used to put in her dresser drawers to keep bugs away. It made my nose sting and my eyes water. Underneath that smell, there was the smell of old rubber and wet dirt. It was the smell of raincoats that never got dry.
I crawled to the ferry back. The space was tight. The walls pressed in on my shoulders. Above me, the coats hung down. In the dark, they felt like long, soft ghosts standing in a row. They brushed against my face. I hid behind the biggest one. It was a giant wool coat that scratched my cheek like a wire brush. It was heavy and thick. I pulled the bottom of it around me like a blanket. I sat on a pile of boots. The leather was hard and cold. The heel of a work boot dug into my leg, right near my knee, but I didn't move to fix it. I didn't wiggle. I heard him walking. The tall man was inside. His boots were heavy. Each step made the floorboards groan. Thump. He sounded like a giant. The vibrations traveled through the floor and up into my legs. I could feel exactly where he was just by how the floor shook. He walked past the closet. I saw a flicker of a shadow through the tiny crack at the bottom of the door. It was a long, black shadow. It looked like a stain moving across the wood. He walked into the big room. That was where the radio was. That was where I dropped the black handle. The heavy footsteps stopped. The house became totally silent. It wasn't a nice silence. It was the kind of silence that happens right before a balloon pops. It was tight and scary. He was looking at the table. He had to be.
He was seeing the black handle swinging back and forth on its curly wire. He was seeing the light on the metal box. Then I heard the sound. It wasn't a word. It wasn't a yell. It was a low, rumbling noise deep in his throat. It sounded like a big dog that is about to bite you. It was a growl. It was wet and angry. It was the sound of a monster finding out that his cave wasn't empty. He knew someone had touched his things. My heart started to beat so fast it hurt. It felt like a bird was trapped inside my chest, banging its wings against my ribs to get out. It was so loud, I was sure he could hear it through the door. I was sure the thump, thump, thump was louder than the thunder. I clamped both of my hands over my mouth. I pinched my nose shut with my fingers. I needed to breathe. My body wanted air. My lungs started to burn. It felt like fire was filling up my chest. The fire got hotter and hotter. My throat wanted to cough. My nose wanted to sniff. But I didn't let go. I held the air inside until black spots danced in the dark in front of my eyes. If I let a single breath out, if I made even a tiny whistle sound, the closet door would open and the tall man would be standing there. The growl stopped, but the scary noise didn't end. It got louder. The tall man screamed. It wasn't a word I knew. It was just a big, ugly sound that filled up the whole house. Then came the crash. It was the loudest thing I ever heard. It sounded like a car hitting a brick wall right inside the living room. The floor jumped under me. I felt the shake go right through the pile of boots I was sitting on and up my spine. My teeth clicked together. He had thrown the metal box. I knew it. I could hear the pieces. Hard plastic bits skittered across the wood floor. They sounded like a handful of marbles being thrown hard. Something heavy hit the wall and slid down. It made a scratching noise, like fingernails on a chalkboard. He was destroying the room. He was destroying the thing that made the voices. I squeezed my eyes shut so tight that I saw red shapes. I waited for the closet door to get ripped off its hinges. I waited for his big hand to grab my ankle and pull me out into the light. I curled into a tiny ball. I tried to make myself disappear inside the wool coat. But the heavy boots didn't come to the closet. They stomped away. He was moving fast. The footsteps were angry. They hit the floor hard, like he was trying to hurt the wood. He was walking toward the kitchen. That was where the door to the basement was. I heard him stop. The air felt heavy, like a storm was coming. He must have seen the basement door. It was open. I left it open when I ran up the stairs before. He yelled again. This time it sounded like a victory scream. He thought he found me. He thought I was trapped down in the dark with the spiders and the cold cement. He started to run. The heavy boots thundered down the wooden stairs. The old steps screamed under his weight. He was going down fast, stumbling and sliding. He sounded like a bear falling down a hill. He was gone. He was downstairs. My brain screamed at me, "Go!" My legs didn't want to listen. They felt like they were made of jelly. They shook so bad I didn't think I could stand up. But I knew I couldn't stay in the closet. The closet was a trap now. If he came back up and didn't find me in the basement, he would look here next. I pushed the heavy wool coat away. It fell off my shoulder. The smell of the mothballs was making me dizzy. I reached for the doorknob. My hand was slippery with sweat. The brass knob felt freezing cold. I turned it slowly. The latch made a tiny snick sound. It seemed so loud in the quiet house. I pushed the white door open just a crack. I peeked out with one eye. The hallway was empty. I looked into the big room. It was a mess. The table was tipped over. The silver radio was smashed on the floor. It was in 100 pieces. Wires poked out of it like snake tongues. The black plastic was shattered. It looked like a dead robot. I looked at the front door. It was still open a little bit. Just a crack. A thin line of sunshine cut through the air. Dust motes danced in the light. It looked like a slice of a different world.
It was so bright out there. It looked too bright. It looked like the sun was burning everything. But it was the way out. I took a breath. The air in the house tasted like dust and angry sweat. I crawled out of the closet. The rug felt scratchy on my knees. I didn't stand up. I stayed low, like a mouse. I kept my eyes on the crack in the front door. It was the only safe thing left in the world. I pushed the white door. It was heavy, heavier than I thought. It groaned on its hinges. I squeezed my body through the crack. The wood scraped against my back, but I didn't care. I fell out onto the porch. The world outside was a shock. Inside the house, the air was hot and smelled like old dust. Outside, the air was sharp. It was freezing cold. It hit my face like a slap of ice water. It went up my nose and made my lungs burn. It was so cold, my eyes started to water. The sun was too bright. It wasn't friendly. It was a blinding white eye staring down at me. I had to squint to see. Everything was blurry for a second. I looked down at my feet. I was only wearing my socks. They were my white gym socks with the blue line on the toe. They looked wrong on the dirty gray paint of the porch. They looked unprotected. I couldn't stop. I jumped down the wooden steps. I skipped the last one and landed in the dirt.
It hurt immediately. The ground wasn't soft like the rug in the closet. It was hard and angry. Sharp little rocks poked right through the fabric of my socks. They dug into my heels. It felt like stepping on a pile of broken toys. A sharp pain shot up my leg, but I bit my lip. I didn't make a sound. I started to run. The yard was a mess. It wasn't like the playgrounds at school. The grass was wild. It was tall and yellow and dead. It came all the way up to my waist. It looked like a sea of dry straw. I pushed into it. The grass fought back. The blades were stiff and sharp. They whipped against my bare legs. They scratched my skin like tiny cat claws. My pajamas didn't stop them. The dry stalks hissed against my clothes as I moved. My feet got wet. The ground under the dead grass was muddy and cold. My socks soaked up the water instantly. They felt heavy and squishy. Mud oozed between my toes. It felt gross. It felt like my feet were freezing into blocks of ice. I looked ahead. The yard was so big. It felt like an ocean. I felt tiny, like a bug that could be squashed. There were no walls here. There was no ceiling, just the giant, empty blue sky. It made me feel dizzy. I was too exposed. Anyone could see me. I saw the trees at the end of the yard. They were monsters. They were huge black shapes that went all the way up to the sky. Their trunks were thick and rough. Their branches twisted together like tangled ropes. They looked dark and scary, but they were better than the open yard. I could hide behind a tree. I couldn't hide in the grass. I ran toward the giant trees. My chest hurt. My breath made little white clouds in the air. Then I heard the noise behind me. It came from the house. It wasn't the sound of boots on wood anymore. It was a scream. It didn't sound like a dad yelling. It sounded like a bear roaring in a cave. It was a deep, vibrating noise that shook the air. It was pure anger. He knew. He had gone to the basement and saw the empty room. He knew I tricked him. My heart started beating so fast it hurt my ribs. It felt like a bird trying to break out of a cage. Tears leaked out of my eyes, hot against my cold cheeks. I didn't look back. I knew if I looked back, I would see him standing on the porch. I would see his red face. I would freeze. I just stared at the black trees and forced my heavy, wet feet to move. The rocks cut me. The grass sliced my legs. The cold bit my skin. But the roar behind me was worse than all of it. I ran for the dark woods. The trees swallowed me. The light from the yard disappeared instantly. It wasn't just shady. It was like someone had turned off the sun. The air changed too. It stopped being windy and sharp. Now it was still and heavy. It smelled like wet dirt and rotting leaves, the way the garden smells after it rains for a week. I tried to keep running, but the ground here was tricky. It wasn't flat dirt anymore. It was covered in layers of slippery brown leaves that looked like wet paper. Underneath the leaves, the earth was full of secrets. I didn't see the root. It was hiding. It was thick and knobby, like an old finger pointing out of the ground. It grabbed the toe of my sneaker. I went down hard. My hands hit the dirt first, sliding through the slime of the dead leaves. Then my knees hit a rock. The pain was sudden and hot. It felt like someone had held a match against my skin.
The air whooshed out of my chest, and for a second I couldn't breathe. I just laid there, my face in the dirt, smelling the worms and the decay. I rolled over and looked at my knee. My pajama pants were ripped open. The skin underneath was scraped raw. It looked messy and red. A drop of blood started to slide down my shin. It looked so bright against the gray woods. It made my stomach hurt. I wanted to cry. I wanted my mom to clean it with the stinging spray and put a Band-Aid on it.
But I couldn't cry. Crying makes noise. I heard the sound behind me. It was getting louder. It wasn't the scream anymore. It was the sound of something big smashing through the world. Branches were snapping. It sounded like bones breaking. He was in the forest. He didn't care about the trees. He was too big. He just walked through them. I looked back and saw a flash of his dark coat between the trunks. He was moving so fast. His legs were long, like daddy long-leg spiders. One of his steps was equal to 3 of mine. It wasn't fair. He could just step over the roots that tripped me. I scrambled up. My knee throbbed with every heartbeat, a sharp pinch every time my foot hit the ground. I limped forward. I had to be smaller than him. I had to go where he couldn't fit. In front of me, the woods got messy. There was a huge bush that looked like a tangled ball of wire. It had long green arms covered in sharp spikes, thorns. They looked like shark teeth. I didn't stop. I couldn't go around. The trees were too tight on the sides. I had to go through. I dropped to my hands and knees. The mud squished between my fingers. I had to be a rabbit. Rabbits can hide in the briar patch. Wolves can't. I pushed my head into the dark hole at the bottom of the bush. The thorns grabbed me immediately. They snagged my shirt and pulled tight. One scratched across my ear. It stung, but I pushed harder. I shoved my body into the dark, prickly tunnel. The branches scraped my back like angry fingernails. I squeezed my eyes shut and crawled. I made myself tiny. Behind me, the heavy footsteps stopped. The ground shook a little. He was close. I held my breath until my chest burned. I was just a small thing in the dirt, waiting for the monster to pass. My legs finally stopped listening to me. They felt heavy, like I was wearing boots made of concrete. I tried to lift my feet, but they just dragged through the dead leaves. The pain in my side was the worst part. It felt like a sharp rock was stuck inside my tummy, right under my ribs. Every time I took a breath, the rock twisted. It hurt so much I wanted to throw up. I couldn't run anymore. If I ran one more step, I was going to fall down and never get up. I looked around wildly. The trees were just tall, dark lines. They didn't help. Then I saw it. It was a giant tree that had fallen down a long time ago. It was huge, bigger than a car. It was covered in thick green moss that looked like a fuzzy blanket. One end of the tree was broken open. The middle of the wood was gone. It left a dark, round hole. It looked like a mouth opening up to eat me. I didn't care. I needed to disappear. I dropped to the ground and crawled toward the hollow log.
The mud soaked into the knees of my pajamas instantly. It was cold and wet. I reached the dark hole and pushed my head inside. The smell hit me first. It smelled like the basement in my grandma's house, but wetter. It smelled like dirt and old rain and things that had died in the dark. The wood under my hands wasn't hard like a table. It was soft and mushy. It felt like wet sponge cake. It crumbled when I put weight on it. I pulled my legs inside. The space was tight. The ceiling of the log scraped against my hair. Something thin and sticky touched my cheek. A spider web. I hated spiders. I wanted to brush it away, to scream and slap at my face, but I couldn't. I had to be a statue. I curled into a ball. I pulled my knees all the way up to my chest and wrapped my arms around them. I buried my face in my knees. I was just a lump of clothes in the dark. Then I felt the ground shake. It was a small vibration against my leg. Thump, thump, thump. He was coming. The sound of his boots was heavy. He wasn't walking carefully. He was stomping. He was smashing the leaves and the twigs. He didn't care if the forest heard him. He was the scary thing here. The thumps got louder. My heart started beating so fast it hurt my chest. It felt like a bird trying to fly out of a cage. I took my hands and clamped them over my mouth and nose. I couldn't let him hear me breathe. The air in my lungs started to burn.
He stopped. The heavy footsteps ended right next to the log. I could hear the fabric of his coat swishing. I could hear him breathing. It was a wet, rattling sound like he had a cold. He was so close that if I reached my hand out of the hole, I could have touched his boot. He said a bad word. His voice was low and scratchy, like rocks grinding together. It was an angry sound. I squeezed my eyes shut as tight as they would go. I saw little stars behind my eyelids. I prayed to be invisible. I prayed for the log to swallow me up and keep me safe. Please go away. Please just keep walking. I was just a little kid. I didn't want to be here. I wanted my bed. I wanted the light on. A piece of rotten wood fell from the ceiling of the log and landed in my hair. I didn't move. I didn't twitch. I waited for the hand to grab my ankle.
The shadows stretched out across the ground like long black fingers. They were reaching for my ankles. Then the purple turned to black. It happened so fast. 1 second I could see a bush with red berries, and the next second it was gone. The dark was heavy. It felt like someone had thrown a thick wool blanket over the whole world. It pressed against my eyes. I held my hand up in front of my face, but I couldn't see it. I wiggled my fingers, but I only knew they were moving because I could feel them. It was like I had disappeared. The cold came next. It wasn't like the cold when you wait for the school bus in the morning. It was a mean cold. It felt like invisible teeth were biting my skin through my pajamas. My wet knees felt like blocks of ice. I hugged myself, rubbing my arms as fast as I could, but it didn't help. My teeth started to make noise. They clicked together fast, like a wind-up toy that was broken. I couldn't stop them. My jaw hurt from shaking. I tried to bite my tongue to make it stop, but I just bit it too hard and tasted something like old pennies. I found a tree with rough bark and squeezed my back against it. I needed to know something was solid. The woods were not quiet. The dark was full of noises. High up in the branches, a bird screamed. It didn't sound like a bird. It sounded like a person laughing at me. I knew it was probably an owl, but it didn't sound like the owls in cartoons.
It sounded hungry. Something moved in the leaves to my left. It wasn't the heavy stomp of the tall man. It was a light skittering sound, like a lot of tiny legs running very fast. I squeezed my eyes shut. If I couldn't see the dark, maybe it wasn't there. I tried to think about my room. I have a nightlight shaped like a rocket ship. It makes the walls look soft and blue. I thought about my big plastic bin of Legos. I thought about the sound they make when you dig your hands into the pile. It is a loud, happy crashing sound. I wanted to be there. I wanted to build a castle with walls 10 feet thick. A castle where no one could get in. My eyelids felt heavy, like they had little weights glued to them. I wanted to sleep so bad. My body was tired from running and shivering, but I couldn't sleep. The ground was full of things. I thought about the bugs. I imagined ants crawling into my ears if I laid my head down. I imagined beetles tangling in my hair. I slapped the side of my neck because I thought I felt legs, but nothing was there. I had to stay awake. I pinched the skin on my arm as hard as I could. It hurt, but the pain kept my eyes open. I had to wait for the sun, but in the dark, the sun felt like it was a million years away. The light came back, but it wasn't a happy light. It didn't look like the morning when cartoons are on. The sky was the color of the water in the sink after Dad washes the pots. It was gray and flat. The trees weren't monsters anymore. They were just big, wet sticks sticking out of the ground. They looked tired, just like me. I tried to move my legs, but they didn't want to listen. They felt heavy, like they were made of sandbags. I had to unfold myself slowly. My back made a little popping sound. I crawled out of the hollow log on my hands and knees. The wood inside was soft and mushy. It felt like squishing a rotten apple. The smell was like old dirt that had been wet for 100 years. I stood up and looked at my feet. I didn't have my sneakers anymore. The mud had eaten them yesterday when I ran. Now I only had my socks. They used to be white gym socks. Now they were black and shiny with slime. When I took a step, cold water squeezed out between my toes. It felt gross, like stepping on a giant slug. I tried to walk on my tiptoes to keep my feet dry, but the ground was covered in sharp twigs and wet leaves.
I walked for a very long time. The woods all looked the same. Every tree looked like the last tree. I started to worry that I was walking in a circle. My stomach hurt really bad. It felt like someone had tied a tight knot inside of me. Then it made a loud, angry growling noise. It sounded like a dog was inside my shirt. I pressed my hands hard against my tummy to make it be quiet.
I was scared the tall man would hear my stomach and find me. Then I heard something else. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the birds screaming. It was a long, loud wail. It went up really high and then swooped down low, over and over again. It cut right through the trees. It sounded like the noise the school makes when we have to line up outside for a fire drill, but much louder. It made my chest vibrate. I stopped walking and looked through the brush. Far away through the gray trunks, I saw colors. Flash, flash, flash. They were bright blue and red. They blinked very fast. They looked like the lights we put on the Christmas tree, but they were too bright. They bounced off the wet leaves and made the gray morning look dizzy. I knew what those lights meant. I have seen them on TV. I have seen them go past my house. Police. Mom told me that if I ever got lost, I had to find a police officer. They are the good guys. They make the bad things stop. I forgot about my slimy socks. I forgot about the knot in my stomach. I just wanted to be where the pretty lights were. I pushed past a bush with prickly branches that scratched my cheek. I didn't care. I started to run. My legs still felt heavy, but I made them move faster. The wailing sound got louder and louder until it filled up my whole head. I opened my mouth to yell for help, but my throat was too dry and scratchy. No words came out.
So I just ran toward the flashing blue and red, hoping they wouldn't drive away before I got there.
The prickly bushes finally let go of my shirt. I pushed through the last wall of wet leaves and stumbled out. The ground changed instantly. It wasn't soft, mushy dirt anymore. It was hard and rough. It was black like the sandpaper Dad keeps in the garage to smooth out wood. It felt like ice against the bottoms of my feet. I looked down. My socks were ripped open. I could see my skin, blue and dirty. I stood on the edge of the world where the trees stopped. It was so open here. There was no ceiling of branches to hide me. The gray sky was huge. It stretched out forever. It felt too big, like I might fall upward into the clouds if I didn't hold on to something. The wailing noise was everywhere now. It was so loud it made my teeth hurt. I wanted to cover my ears, but my arms were too tired to lift up. There were cars, so many cars, they weren't moving. They were parked all over the black road in a messy pile, like when I dumped my toy box on the floor. The lights were spinning around and around, blue, red, blue, red. They flashed against the wet pavement and made the whole world look like it was blinking. There was yellow tape stretched out between the trees. It fluttered in the wind like a long plastic snake. There were men walking around.
They looked like giants. They wore dark uniforms with shiny silver badges that caught the gray light. They looked angry and sad at the same time. One man was standing near a car. He was holding a paper cup. I could see the steam rising up from it. It looked like a little ghost dancing in the cold air. I smelled the coffee. It smelled like Sunday morning in our kitchen. It made my throat hurt because I wanted to be in the kitchen. I wanted to be sitting at the table. I tried to say something, but my voice was broken. It was just a little squeak, like a mouse makes. I stepped further onto the black road. My legs were shaking so bad that my knees knocked together. The man with the coffee turned around. He was tall and wide. He had a thick mustache like my uncle. He looked right at me. He stopped moving. He dropped his cup. It hit the ground, and the brown liquid splashed all over his shiny black boots. He didn't even look at the mess. He just stared at my face. His eyes got very wide. His mouth opened a little bit. He looked like he was seeing a monster or a ghost. He looked terrified of me. I thought maybe I was in trouble. I thought maybe I wasn't supposed to be on the road. I slowly lifted my hand. It was covered in dried mud and scratches. I waved. Just a little tiny wave. The man shouted. It was a loud, scary sound. He pointed at me. Then he started running. He ran really fast.
His boots made loud thumping sounds on the pavement. Other men looked up. They started running too. They were all running at me. I wanted to run away. I was used to running away from big things, but my feet were stuck to the road. The man with the mustache got to me first. He fell on his knees. He slid a little bit on the gritty road. He didn't grab me. He just hovered his hands around me, like he was afraid I might break into a million pieces if he touched me. He was yelling words I didn't understand. He looked at my face and he started to cry. Real tears ran down his cheeks and into his mustache. He took off his big jacket. It smelled like rain and peppermint gum. He wrapped it around my shoulders. It was so heavy, it almost pushed me down to the ground, but it was warm. It was the warmest thing I had ever felt. The zipper scratched my chin, but I didn't mind. I buried my face in the collar. The dark world went away. I was inside the coat now. I closed my eyes. The sirens were still screaming, but the shaking in my legs finally stopped. The lights inside the truck were too bright. They stabbed my eyes.
I blinked, but the white spots stayed there, floating in the air like dust. I was sitting on a bed that felt like paper. The walls were white and metal. There were drawers everywhere. There were clear tubes hanging from the ceiling. It didn't smell like the wet woods anymore. It didn't smell like rain. It smelled sharp. It smelled like the clear liquid the school nurse puts on a scraped knee. It burned inside my nose and made me want to sneeze. A lady was sitting next to me. She had kind eyes and her hair was tied back in a tight ponytail. She wasn't shaking like I was. She touched my arm with soft fingers. She put a silver blanket around me. It made a loud crinkling noise every time I moved. It looked like the foil Mom uses to wrap leftover pizza. I felt like a leftover. I pulled it tight around my neck. She handed me a small box. It was yellow, a juice box. My hands wouldn't work right. My fingers were stiff claws covered in dried mud. I couldn't hold it properly. The lady smiled a sad smile and poked a little white straw into the hole for me. I took a sip. The taste exploded in my mouth. It was sweet. It was cold. It tasted like real apples. It didn't taste like dirt or old metal or the pennies I tasted when I fell. It tasted like home. I drank it all in one big breath.
The box made a loud sucking noise when it was empty. The sound seemed huge in the small room. I held on to the empty box. I didn't want to let go. It was mine. Then the big doors at the back of the truck moved. A man stepped onto the metal ledge. He wasn't wearing a police uniform. He had a blue flannel shirt on. He looked very tired. He was holding something in his hand. I froze. My heart started hammering against my ribs again. It was a black box with a long antenna, a radio. I pushed myself back against the wall of the ambulance. The crinkly blanket made a lot of noise. I wanted to hide. Radios were bad. Radios made the static noise that hurt my head. Radios meant the bad man was coming. I stared at the black box. I waited for the screaming sound. But this radio was quiet. The man didn't look scary. He looked at me like he was trying to solve a puzzle. He crouched down so he wasn't tall anymore. He was my size. He stayed near the doors. He didn't come too close. "Hey, buddy," he said. His voice was scratchy, like he had been yelling. He held up the black box. Were you the one humming?" I looked down at my knees. My skin was still blue under the dirt. I remembered the dark room. I remembered the melody I made to keep the monsters away. I remembered pressing the button.
I nodded. My head felt heavy, like a bowling ball. The man let out a long breath. His shoulders dropped. His eyes got very shiny. Water started to pool in the corners of them. He smiled, but his chin was trembling. He looked like he was going to cry, but he looked happy too. Adults are confusing. "She heard you," he whispered. The words were soft. "Your mom." She heard the humming on the radio. My stomach did a flip. "Mommy." The word felt huge. I hadn't said that word in a long time. I thought that word was gone forever. "She's 5 minutes away," the man said. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. The air in the ambulance felt different. The sharp smell wasn't so bad anymore. I looked out the back windows, past the man's shoulder. The night was still there. The trees were still dark and tall.
The world was giant. It was full of sharp rocks and deep holes and bad men. But the flashing lights were painting the trees red and blue. The darkness was being pushed back. I squeezed the empty juice box in my hand. The static was gone. I wasn't just a lost thing in the woods anymore. I was found.